So the last video wasn't actually the last video. I realized there's a lot more I need to go over. So I covered all like the basic features, what I did have implemented and what I didn't have implemented in the first 4 videos. I thought I had to submit right at 11:59, so I was like rushing to try to get everything, but I realized you don't actually check them until 5 in the morning or something like that. So I'll take this time to make the videos better for you and also actually go through everything that I do have in detail in terms of like code elements and all that. So the first thing for the strategy pattern, which I mentioned but probably should go into more detail about. So for my input strategy, it's a base class that should not derive from public object. And then there's an activate and deactivate, which I'll describe why I made that choice. But this is all empty right here. So if I go to the AI controller, for some reason, if I did like say set players control type equal to AI control or equal to keyboard control, it just didn't like it. Maybe my code acknowledge isn't that extensive, but I'll try to show you what I mean. So set control type. So if I do like my controller, which is of type input manager, which is the base class that these are derived from, equal to AI controller. Never mind. That seems to work just fine. So the problem that I was actually having that in is my sound manager. This is a bit all over the place, my bad. So if I wanted to sound strategy, if I wanted to, let's say for the blaster sound, my sound, which is of type sound strategy, which is a base class, equal to muted sound. This is where I was having the problem. I don't know what I did different between the two strategies, but it says conversion to inaccessible base class sound strategy is not allowed. So I will show this here for my sound strategy, which is down here. Sound strategy.cpp. It's set up the exact same way. It's a base class that the others derive from. Plain stop sounds, activate, deactivate, and then audible and muted sound strategies derived from that sound strategy class. So I had it basically the same way I set up the input manager because that was working just fine, but I just couldn't swap between the two, so that's why I decided to not. That's why the sound strategy isn't working as well as I wanted it to, so I kind of half-assed it to where not everything uses it, but the things that do use it are the ones in the attractor mode, which is what I thought mattered overall. Since those are the ones that those are the ones that don't need to be playing sound during the attractor mode, so I just use the strategy on those objects, so which is the blaster, centipede, and spider. So I'll run this to get to the attractor mode. And while it's loading, I'll open up the other strategy, which does work. So there you go, the attractor mode, and what was I doing? Alright, the sound manager. So the sound manager, sound strategy, my bad. There are no sounds playing during this, there's no centipede beat, but if I run this, then that's all good. Actually, I just realized why why I was deriving from the game object, and I should not have changed that, because that just broke my movement. Sorry about that. Run this, it'll move just fine, so there's no sound in the attractor mode as I said, based on that strategy that I could get working for the sound. And then the input manager I already showed in the previous videos, but based on which one the blaster is using at that time, it calls the move up, down, left, right functions on it, which just literally tell it to move a certain amount, and then it does that respective thing. So if I set the control type, I deactivate the AI and activate the keyboard, and vice versa for the other one. There you go. And that seems to work just fine. So the only problem was with the sound strategy. The observer mode I already talked about with the bullet. So the bullet gets the ship passed in through initialization. This happens like pretty much everywhere in the code. I don't think it's possible to code without the observer pattern. But yeah, a lot of things are just passed in where they need a reference to things. Like the spider needs a reference to the mushroom field. The flea needs a reference to the mushroom field, etc., etc. I think all the critters need a reference to it. And so all these systems just build upon each other, which I found kind of dangerous, I guess. Not dangerous. It got really complex, and things that shouldn't rely on systems did end up relying on systems, which is why my mess with the wave manager and the enemy spawner and game manager and all that just messed up, because they were depending on each other at some point. So I had to go through and completely redo those. But that was partly observer pattern, which is why I'm bringing it up, because they were trying to set things that didn't exist yet. But yeah, that's about it for the observer pattern. Again, it exists pretty much everywhere in this code. These simple factory patterns, I went over in more detail in the previous videos again. I think I did a decent job at explaining them, but again, they're set up as a singleton, and how those are just, I only allow one instance. I have a stack of recycled items that are cast as the item type, and then pushed onto that stack, and then when I need one, I just grab it from the stack and initialize it at the right, whatever parameters I need with initialization. Same with the explosion. Again, these are all set up the exact same way. They all have an object pool as long as they need to. Well, yeah, all factories need to. My bad. Mushroom, scorpion, etc. The only thing that keeps track of an active element, because I was having problems with not keeping track of it, was keeping track to see if there's a current spider spawned. If one is created, then it's true, otherwise it's false. This is used in the wave manager because the spiders were just spawning like crazy, and I didn't want to set too many alarms saying oh, wait this amount and then do this. So what that does is just calls the spider factory to see if there's a spider already within the scene, so spider factory, spider alive. If there's not, then spawn a spider. I will actually go over my enemy spawner in this video, since I didn't do that previously since I was rushing. But that's it for my factories. For singletons, since I showed it in the factory already, I'll show them for my managers. So the one that I came to you during class about was my game manager having problems. And you told me that, you showed me that the fix for that was because it was a game object, which I think a couple of my singletons are. And so because it's a game object, it gets deleted upon scene termination, which means terminate wasn't being called, but the destructor was. I didn't end up needing to cancel the alarms, but I did have to reset the pointer to null. I couldn't delete the instance though, because it would cause the same problem, but I had set it to null so that it would create a new one. Actually no, because it would still be deleted. My bad, game objects are deleted. Yeah, and then it'll just reset that to null. So my game manager is a singleton because I needed multiple things to access it from different hierarchies, different levels of my game. I couldn't just be using the observer pattern to pass it along, because the game manager is in charge of everything. It's in charge of the wave manager, player manager, and it uses all those things in tandem to create the game loop. The game loop being pushed through by the amount of heads in the scene. It's the amount of active heads it keeps track of, and then when there's no more heads in the scene, it'll set this alarm at a wave delay. Sound manager stops the centipede sound, But then what that alarm does is that it tells the wave manager to update the wave. And what update wave does is it increases the current wave of the active player, so it'll just add 1 to it. And then it'll start the wave again, which is the same game loop. So using that new wave, it'll spawn a scorpion if it has to, spider, scorpion, scorpion, spider, centipede, and solo heads. And since I don't think I went over this too well, I'll show this again. So no solo heads, 4 segments for this first one. This will be 5 segments and 1 solo head. So 5 segments, 1 solo head. And then to show that this does work, this isn't going to spawn anything else. There's the scorpion. Oops. Yeah. Waves update just fine. I showed previously that I can change any of those values in my resources, wave data. So if I want this to start with like 14 wave 1, I'll run this. It'll start with it'll start with 14. So that's all good. Splitting works fine. No crashes with splitting, so that's my 1 victory here. Small victory, because that was like the thing that I was most concerned about was my splitting that wasn't working, but it's all good now. Let's see what else is there to talk about. So that's my game manager set up as the singleton. Observer pattern I talked about, it's mentioned twice. Explosions, I showed the 2 explosion types, so the spider and the regular. My bullet is created by factory. My blaster doesn't need a factory because I'll show how this works here. My blaster has like a pseudo death, so it's right here, pseudo death. So it's a fake death where it just sets the scale to 0 so it's not visible, deactivates the keyboard, and deregisters the collision. And then again, this talks to the game manager. The game manager has an alarm that once the blaster is killed, it'll call that alarm as long as the player's lives are above 0 to set alarm 1, and then that player death delay, and then alarm 1 just calls revive on the current blaster. And then what revive does is, of course, just sets the scale back to normal, re-registers collision, and re-registers the keyboard strategy. And I found that was the quickest way. It's not a factory, so it's not pretty, but it reuses the same blaster anyway, so I didn't think there was too much of a problem there. Centipede, I showed the movement of the centipede and how info is passed down and how it splits. I didn't talk about the base class. The base class has some important information that both share, whether it's a head, the counter it's on, position and grid, the current field, speed, position, and its current array. These do not need to be public. I had switched those because I guess I was just lazy to go through and create a function. But basically, this is the base class it derives from, and we'll go through here. Head, based on the centipede base, then it just sets all these parameters, and then I already showed how the movement works, so that's all good. Using the state pattern, didn't use a state pattern, linked movement, so again the segment just gets the previous movement, the previous array position of the old array, and then it passes that old array to the next segment, and so on and so forth. They are copied over and over, which kind of sucks. They should have been offloaded somewhere else, but yeah, there's just no excuse. They're just copied several times, which is really inefficient. But that's how I have that set up. And then for the... Actually, look at this video here, and then I'll keep talking about some of the other systems.